Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to you. My name is Shama Banerjee, and I am the Senior Editor at Nimbus 90, and we're delighted that you are joining us for our second episode in our summer series, In Conversation with Digital Leaders. So this series is all about getting a front row seat into the IT strategies for different industry disruptors and how they built their digital advantage, as well as giving you the chance to discuss your challenges with experts from Equinix. So before I introduce our speakers for this morning, there is a Q&A box at the right of your screen. Please do put any questions you have for our speakers in there, and we will aim to ask as many as we can at the end of the session. We also will be kicking off with a poll this morning, so you can find that also at the right of your screen. Please do head over into there now. And you can answer the questions. We'll be digging into the results of that towards the end of the session. So to introduce our digital leader for today, we are going to hear from Chris Truman. He is the Director of Global Networks and Voice at Aviva. Chris is an experienced technology leader who has directed IT projects and operations across global organizations with various business sectors, including FMCG, manufacturing, financial services. And previous to Aviva, he worked at Equinix, SAB Miller, Motability, Rexam, and GSK. So Chris, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I'll now hand over to Matt George, who is the Director of Segment Marketing for EMEA at Equinix, and he will be chairing the discussion. Matt joined Equinix in 2012 and is one of the company's global subject matter experts. He sits as an overlay between the sales and technical teams. He advises companies on the best ways to improve connectivity and global reach through the deployment of Equinix's global interconnection platform. So Matt, I'll hand over to you now. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everybody. And morning, Chris. Thank you for joining us. Very pleased to have you with us this morning in our second conversation with digital leaders. And as this series goes on, the audience will be able to see sort of a vast selection of different businesses. So we're delighted to have the viewpoint from Aviva this morning. So, the last 12, 14 months that we've all gone through from a business and a personal perspective has been, totally unprecedented. Now, we both know that digital transformation was happening pre-pandemic, but, in the last sort of 12 months, what are the sort of some of the key shifts in IT infrastructure and planning that you have seen at Aviva, and obviously being an experienced practitioner yourself, an insight into how you've possibly sort of, cope with that and how a transformation roadmap has possibly been reshaped.
Thanks, Matt. So as you say, I don't think you can look at the last 18 months without using the C word. It's a horrible word. From an Aviva point of view, it's been quite an interesting journey. We were in the middle of a network transformation project when COVID actually kicked in. So it was in some ways you could say it's been good timing, because what the pandemic has done is really shine a light on where we needed to invest differently. So from an Aviva point of view, the rapid adoption of remote working was a huge hill. If you look at our core businesses, contact center workers were seen as you work from the office. If you're a contact center worker, you don't work from home. That was very much the thinking within the organization. We turned that on its head inside 6 weeks. So the change to how we work rather than necessarily the technology was probably the biggest impact. We're very customer centric, as I'm sure most of the organizations on this call are. We're very customer centric, and it was all about making sure we could service our customers with minimal impact. Everybody was going through a tough time, so getting the technology in place to support that was our first step, and obviously having the means to support our staff was hot on the heels of that. So move to mobile computing. I don't think we have a single desktop left in the organization. Everybody now has a laptop. Everybody has a form of mobile communication. We had to spin up a virtual contact center, cloud-based contact center, in the best part of 7 days, which we had never done before. We had to train people on it, get them using it. So the speed was the key to make sure that our staff were safe, but we're still serving our customers. So I mentioned that it was useful for the project because it has really focused people's attention on where infrastructure needs to change and speed up. So it's been an interesting journey, but for us it was safety, customer, speed. Those were the main drivers. Oh, Matt, you're on mute.
There we go. I didn't want to interrupt you. See, thank you for that. A great insight into those sort of the early days and now where companies find themselves. And I think, what we're seeing is that things were done. They were done at a quicker speed, and sometimes areas where companies possibly thought no, that isn't possible or that isn't the right process, was sort of actually, that inertia was removed. So you talk about, we know technology can enable, and as you say, everyone shifted to a more remote workplace. That sort of, I suppose, location dependent has shifted to a location independent. But what about, technology challenges? I think you certainly overcome, but what about that people perspective as well? Balancing, Aviva's a huge company. You have employees that have been working in offices and they suddenly get shifted. So what have been the sort of biggest challenges from both technology and then also aligning the people side?
Can I flip that and do the people first?
You certainly can.
So the people aspect, it's been really enlightening and insightful in what we've learned. If I focus on our customer front staff first of all, if you're working from home and you've got to school your kids at home and you're trying to talk to customers, that's really hard. For some people it was just not possible. So we've adopted working patterns to support those staff. We really want to make sure that we kept everybody engaged, and that's been broadly successful. And we can talk some more about our future plans later if you like. But what was insightful was understanding that certain people have different needs. So there's a lot in the press about people's mental well-being, mental health. I've had staff in my direct team where they're very confident, they're really good at their job, they're fantastic. When you take away that human interaction side, when they were in lockdown, they really found it tough. So we've put an awful lot of effort into supporting our staff and making sure they've got what they need. That was insightful. It was also a great leveler because suddenly nobody's got a big office, nobody's got a fancy desk, everybody's working from home. You're seeing people with ironing hanging up behind them and goodness knows what going on. You've got kids, but my favorite thing of COVID has been the video bombing of kids just running in when someone's in the middle of a serious discussion and mummy, daddy, hi, I'm here. It has been a great leveler, and I think in some respects it's kind of made us all a little bit more human, which has been nice. We had a great scenario when for our network refresh we had a CEO pitching to us, and what he didn't know is he was sat in his office looking very presidential, and behind him was his 8-year-old daughter who kept peeking behind the curtains. He couldn't work out why we were laughing. It was good fun. So the people side's been really really interesting, and I don't think it's a journey that anyone's finished. I think we're all going to continue down that road, especially when we talk about working patterns and what the new normal looks like. In terms of technology challenges, one of our big learning curves, and I'm a nerdy techie, right? So I find this quite shocking of all, how much training staff need on some of the very basics, and it's become a major area of focus for the organization because we were having, again, specifically in our contact center area, we were having lots of people having challenges, drop calls, poor quality of audio, and most of them were down to poor behaviors. They just didn't know. The staff didn't know that if you try and sit at the bottom of the garden away from your Wi-Fi, that might give you a poorer signal. Therefore, your quality of call will be worse. So there's been a lot of education. That's been one of the major drivers behind technology for us is getting people trained to exploit it correctly. And you mentioned speed. A great example. We were in the middle of transitioning from Skype to Teams when lockdown started, and we had like a 9-month rollout plan. Well, that wasn't going to move. Skype isn't. Teams is a much better remote working platform. We accelerated that and did it in 9 weeks, and that has been really successful. But again, it's about getting the training in place so people can adopt it quickly, and then changing people's mindsets to think more agilely and think about the impact of the staff who are supporting our customers. So that's been the again, it's more people challenge than the technology, but it's getting the technology out there quicker has been our one of our biggest challenges.
I love the point about the leveling out of the sort of hierarchy. I had a great anecdote the other week where a CTO was talking about his team interaction, and of course there was that obvious concern that people were remote and you missed that face-to-face contact and sometimes reading the room. But he made a really good point that he said he felt that the more junior members of the team have become more confident and were actually contributing more to meetings. And while he was keen to go back and see everybody and have that face-to-face contact, he didn't want to lose that. What he felt was a real positive that had come out with team collaboration, because you're all sort of putting this situation together, and I've heard that across a number of businesses. So when we talk about, there's this view now that the IT department has become much more important in the company, because at the start of the pandemic, it was an area where, it was like, we need help, we need support, we need to literally keep the wheels turning of the business. And when we look at IT, when Equinix talks to a company, we talk to multiple departments. We talk to people like yourselves in the network side. We talk to people that are looking at data centers. We talk to people that are, really focusing on new technology sort of at the edge. So in your business, have you seen sort of greater collaboration across functions, which maybe had worked in silos before, but you've now come together?
Great question. So yes, and I think we're still learning what that really means. So obviously Aviva is a regulated organization, so we take security very seriously. So our CISO chaps, it's all good humored. They do sit in their own little towers, as it were, but we had to make some rapid changes to our working environment. If an example would be split tunneling the VPN. If you'd have asked me 18 months ago, could we split tunnel the VPN, I would have been told no. Everything has to come through the VPN. We absolutely need oversight of every single packet. That was the approach. It became very clear in the early days of COVID that we needed to offload as much of that traffic as possible. To be fair, we were knocking on that door before COVID, because we knew this was it's best practice. But I think it opened certainly our CISO colleagues' eyes to saying, actually, we need to work differently. So those bridges are still being built. We're still working out how across an organization that is global and is as I want to say conservative, that's probably the wrong word, certainly as traditional as Aviva, how we can break those barriers down and work more. Again, I like the word agile, fleet of foot. We need to move quicker. We don't necessarily need to get product to market quickly because of what we do. We do need to get communications to market more quickly, which means we need to engage our staff better. So yeah, we're still learning what that means. Our cloud department is another good example where during COVID we've kind of ridden the pain wave, got through the other side, and said, okay, what does this mean for our cloud journey? Where are we going? We had a roadmap that's now been turned on its head, and the integration between CISO, cloud, our traditional hosting department, and networks are getting closer. I still don't think we're there. I still think we're learning, but it's certainly driven a different way of thinking. Yes, so collaboration is a good word. It's not always an easy word.
No, I think in some, there's always this view, isn't there? In adversity, people find ways to work differently, and I think we've definitely seen that. And now, we had conversations like this with companies probably 3 months into the pandemic, And it was always, there was that view, I think, that people thought, oh, right, well, once we get back to normal, you know, this will happen. But 14 months on, you know, the new habits have formed, new ways of working have formed. So it's interesting to sort of to hear you say that. Now, one of the obviously businesses, and your business covers, you're an insurer, but you cover so many different sectors. You know, sectors that have been affected. So travel and motor insurance. You know, we've all done a lot less of that in the last 12 months. So when your business looks at costs from an IT perspective, and I tend to use the term cost optimization as opposed to cost savings, because as you were saying, your roadmap has been revisited. So are you managing that balance now? If you look at IT between what would be previously traditional CapEx, you know, where there's that physical footprint, moving much more to an OpEx model where you're consuming services on demand, you know, much more as a service to help your financial model. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll refer to our network refresh. It's actually, the project's called P18, and one of the tenets of it was I didn't want to buy tin. Traditionally, you would go out, you'd buy a load of tin for whatever reason, whether that was for UC, contact center, or for network. That it was a great model for a period, but unfortunately, you're stuck with that tin. So I want to have a much more consumption-based model. We've broadly achieved that. What's been interesting is we could get that through our mind and through our financial department's mind quite easily. The vendors in the market, I think, I'm not including Equinix in this, by the way, but if you look at some of the traditional telcos, they found that shift really hard. And during the negotiations with P18, it became quite frustrating that that digital shift isn't there for some of the big telcos. I'm sure it'll get there over the next year or so, but it certainly wasn't there a year ago. We were really pushing hard on. Don't just sell me a box. Sell me an outcome. I want to talk about outcomes. The contact center story has actually been an interesting one. We've gone with a cloud-based provider purely because we can do literally we can increase, decrease, and get charged. I think it's a 15-minute window we get charged by, which is exactly what we need, because we had Friday was a great example. We had severe flash flooding in Norwich on Friday. We know Norwich because we've got Norwich Union. Historically, we have a big office there, and our office got flooded. We lost a couple of floors due to this amazing rain. When there are events like that across the country, we need to spin people up quickly, because we know we're going to have customers phoning us, and we need to react very, very speedily. So being able to have that consumption-based digital model, much more cost optimized, as you say, and gives us a degree of confidence that we can predict our costs more easily rather than that traditional model, because spinning things up took time. We don't want to be burning those cycles. So it's about consumption and removing those legacy delays that's been our driver for the P18 refresh.
I think, and thank you for the tangible and very recent example with the flooding. I think, you know, when people sometimes think of the insurance business, they don't typically see it as being what I would call event driven. You know, we work with a lot of companies in sectors that are event driven. You know, if you look at the e-commerce side, if you look at I suppose the media and entertainment side, and we've seen, you know, huge demands on sort of resource, I suppose, talking about it in general. But I think that the linking factor between all of that is this agile infrastructure, this ability now to be able to react very quickly. You know, a lot of companies now, when we look at their sort of IT footprint, we see them have very much a sort of a core and an edge. Now, the edge is a interesting conversation, because the edge can sometimes mean different things to different people. And I think we now do not just have your customers at the edge, you also have your employees. We were talking earlier about people now working from home. So sort of what does I suppose the core and the edge look like for Aviva? Do you describe it like that? Do you sort of build your footprint like that?
guess I would, yes and no. Sorry to give you a hodged answer. So I'm slightly long in the tooth. So I remember the traditional model of, you know, core distribution access, and when I think back in the early 2000s, Cisco changed that model. It was really hard to digest. What's ironic is it's now really easy to digest that, because it's not about core and edge anymore. It's about the customer journey. So we certainly have an edge for our customers to interact. That edge is getting closer to the core systems, because we know, whilst it's a secure connection, we've got all the right various controls in place. We need to remove as much chat in the back end to give that customer the best experience. So if you look at our the My Aviva app, which is our kind of a single portal for customers to view their policies and what have you, that move towards bringing that closer to the systems is an ongoing story. So we tend to think more of how do, and certainly from an infrastructure point of view, how does that journey traverse the network, the hosting, the cloud? We are a very cloud focused organization. We have an aspiration to be 80% cloud based. Traversing that core and edge is really where our focus is. We don't tend to sit so much on, we don't tend to focus so much on the words core and edge anymore. We tend to focus on the journey and how does that transaction flow through the system. So whilst there is clearly an edge for customers to connect to, that's not our focus point. Our focus point is on making sure that the journey through those various systems and infrastructure points is as simple as possible and as monitored as possible.
Great, thank you. We've got, as we said at the beginning, there are some polls that are up. So if people can answer the poll, one request from me, I can see the questions to the poll, but I can't see the results. So I'm not sure if they're going to be concluded at the end. But what I will move to is we've got a question that's come in, Chris. So how has Aviva dealt with home working for frontline staff and dealing with voice and PCI? So that's one of the questions. Thank you for that coming in to the audience.
Good question. So PCI, we have. I'll take that first. We've deployed a specific technology to enable PCI, so that we're PCI compliant. We also do surveys. That's probably the wrong word. We do surveys of people's working environment, and we ask people to self-testify on their working environment. So, for example, if you look at my working environment, I'm at the end of a corridor. No one can overlook my screen. No one can overhear me. It's, you know, I'm not sat next to a public window where people can see my screen. So we do ask staff to upload photos of where they're working, how they're working. We also, again, going back to the human aspect, is it a good working environment for some people? You know, is it good for their well-being? So we also approach it from that angle. So certainly from a PCI point of view, we're very, very hot on that. From a technology point of view, as I mentioned earlier, we are on a traditional contact center platform. So we've issued staff with mobile devices, and we have effectively, we call them. So when an agent logs on, the system calls them, and we have that call crudely described it as a nailed up call. So we know that they're online, we know that they're working, and then from a supervisory and management point of view, we can see call flows, all the usual good data points. So I guess there's three aspects. There's the security aspect, there's the well-being aspect, and then there's the technology aspect. They have all come together relatively well. What has been interesting is the amount of people that there's a real mix of people that want to go back to the office. Some people just need to be around other people. They have a need to be there. And I've got teams who were really against home working, who have, in fact, one of my team, I look after the software asset management team in Aviva. They were a really close team. They were really close, and like being in the office together. They've done a complete 180. They now do their one-to-ones. They meet up, directly do one-to-ones at coffee shops or wherever. It's really working for them. So again, it's been an interesting journey in terms of how different teams have dealt with it. But yeah, the PCI question is a good point, because it's an area where we're fairly focused just from a regulatory point of view.
Yes, great question. Thank you for that. So, and I think, you know, that one of the themes that I think in our conversation this morning is this word journey, and it's still ongoing. So to sort of, you know, and I don't think you'll have an exact answer to this, but you'll have a sort of, I suppose, a roadmap. So the next 6 to 12 months, and is your planning cycle now, are your planning cycles shorter? Is it 6 to 12 months? Because normally people talk about a 3-year plan. Well, if we'd written a 3-year plan, as every business did, 3 years ago, it would be completely wrong. So I suppose the next 6 to 12 months, what are your focus areas?
So I'll answer that from a business point of view, and then from a, if you like, from my perspective. So people talk about return to normal. There isn't a return to normal. There is a transition to whatever is next. I don't think there is a return to how things worked. So we're very much focused on where staff want to get back to the office, they can do. That's driving a change in technology for my area. So we're looking at increased flexibility for staff. So simple things like better Wi-Fi coverage, better devices, making sure that people can connect wherever they need to connect. That's certainly a business driver. Getting staff back to, if they need to, is the continual focus and obsession with making sure if our customer needs to contact us, they can. We do have stories of if people calling us from the side of a motorway, they're a single mother with 2 kids in the car and they're broken down. We need to be able to answer their calls, whether that be SMS, telephone, email, whatever it is. We need to have people on being able to serve those customers. So being able to work wherever the staff need to work and having that always on mentality is certainly one of our areas of focus for the business. We're also going through some divestments within the organization. So we're focusing on what we call our invest markets. So we are divesting some of our overseas markets. That's a major area of focus. Bringing it back to kind of my view of the world, there's the cloud. Our cloud journey is a major driver for us. We're looking at a poly-cloud infrastructure. We're actually working with Equinix on this. It's been a really good story so far in terms of how we can develop kind of our next stage of cloud. We're kind of I view us as we're kind of on our cloud 1.0 at the moment, and we are moving to the next iteration of that, as well as obviously finishing the network optimization and contact center migrations, which do tend to take up quite a bit of my time.
Yes, I can imagine so. We've got a couple more questions coming in, so I want to throw those out because
Sure.
they're great questions. One's a very functional question and sort of touches, I suppose, well-being and staff management. So how have you dealt with sort of any requests from team to sort of maybe cover costs at home, like extra broadband cost or utilities cost, etc.? I suppose that's maybe a corporate policy that you have. Is there anything you can comment on that?
So we've certainly dealt with it. It's not a corporate policy at the moment. We're developed. That is still being developed because it was all done in such a hurry. We didn't have a policy for it. We're developing that. We are covering costs where needed. The company's done a great job of if people need to screen any technology needed, even down to a chair. We've had people going in and raiding the offices. Some of our offices have got no chairs left, no desks left, no screens left, because they've been sent to people's homes, and we've done a really good job on that. And we are looking on a kind of team by team basis at the moment from a cost covering point of view, but we are also looking at a corporate policy to decide how will we cover the fee going down. Again, one of our concerns is we don't dictate who our staff use as an ISP, but if a major ISP has an issue in one of our metropolitan areas, Norwich is a good example, a large part of our staff are going to be impacted. So we need to have again, how do we get staff connected in that situation? So we're also developing that policy around, do we give them 5G devices? Do we what's our fallback position? So that's still in development.
Yes, I think a number of these things are ongoing, as you sort of say, and when the situations arise, you approach it. I think a lot of companies are still in that mindset. There's one more which I think is a particularly interesting. We were talking about Teams and the collaboration tools. So this one was are you using Teams with your frontline staff, and really asking about training. This question comes from someone who says we have seen challenges in training and finding a good way how to use it. Any sort of first-hand experience you can offer on that question?
So I think everybody faces that challenge. So you're not, whoever's asked that question, you're not alone. That's if that's any reassurance. In terms of how we've approached that, we have a really good a training department with Sand HR who do a good job of pushing articles. So we're a big Microsoft house. We use Yammer and what have you. So we push out training articles fairly regularly. We also do directs. So we have a lot of forums where people can post questions. So very often people, we've had some examples where people have said, "This, how do I do this? This isn't working." And across my wider the department I work in, which is called GIO, we keep an eye on those forums, and we encourage staff to directly step in and answer, because again, if it's a frontline staff member, we want need to make sure they're getting the support they need. So we use forums a lot to try and answer questions. I don't think there is a magic bullet for this. I think there is no one answer to how you get staff trained. Everybody learns in a different way, but it's about making sure they've got avenues where they can go to ask questions, rather than just an FAQ just doesn't work, right? So yeah, we like to have different methods to people to access to get the answers they're looking for. Great,
and actually that enabled me, while you were answering that question and using technology, it enabled me to work out how I could decipher the polls. So that was perfectly good timing.
Glad to help.
So we asked 3 questions, 3 polls at the beginning. Let's start in no particular order, but then maybe you can comment on some of these, Chris. So I was talking about IT becoming a more important focus in the business. So I think, you'll be pleased to know, and a lot of the IT practitioners know, that there was a whopping 90% of people thought that was the case. And I think that's not unexpected. We then were talking about the digital transformation journey, and I think what we've realized here is that Aviva, as you said, the transformation journey was pre-pandemic. It's accelerated, and we had 3 sort of levels. We asked beginning, maturing, and advanced. So, 60% are maturing their transformation journey, which I think plays to the point that this is ongoing. And I'll just ping the last one out, and then maybe you can give me some comments back. So this one was a bit more detailed. The question was, which of the following is the most important to your business in the next 12 months? So we looked at IT cost optimization, developing a hybrid working model, incorporating more virtualized services, or all of the above. So obviously all of the above is a bit of a catch-all question, but the working model got 40% of the responses, but the virtualized services, which I think is really interesting, it shows that move, got 20% of the vote as well. So any thoughts and comments on any of that feedback?
So on the last one, I think it isn't all of the above, but I think it's a priority order. So I think developing the hybrid working model, that's on everyone's mind, right? How will we deal with whatever comes next? That's underpinned by, I think, if you're thinking in the right directions, how do I exploit virtualized services more, which then drives that IT cost optimization. It goes back to my point earlier about not buying tin. We need to have the right working model. We need to be using the right technologies to drive the outcome for cost optimization. So it is all of the above, but I think there's a priority order, and I think most organizations are probably looking at it in that way.
Great. Okay. Shama, I think I'm looking at the clock. We've sort of 5 minutes past. We've had some great interaction from the audience. We've managed to work the polls. Can I hand back to you? Is there anything we've missed this morning?
So I wonder if there are some more questions that came through on the Q&A which we haven't addressed. Matt, I wonder if you would like to pick out some of the questions that we haven't had a look at yet. I'm looking particularly at, I think Simon Holford put a really interesting question in there, which...
got that one. Yes.
Yeah, I think you've kind of covered already, but I think this is...
Well, no, let's dig into it a bit more. Yeah. So we now have, businesses, Aviva, you now have teams that are dispersed all over the place, really, sort of remotely. And I've experienced this ourselves with Equinix. Now, the collaboration tools, as we're all talking this morning, you know, we can have this conversation. None of us have had to jump on a train and go anywhere. And I think, you know, we've shared some great insights. But when you've got a more maybe creative challenge, how have the teams come together to sort of resolve that? Is it still difficult? Are there some limitations? I'll give you an example from an Equinix point of view. I was talking to some of our solutions architects, and they missed that, I suppose, whiteboarding type of session. So that was Simon's question. So thank you, Simon, for that.
Good question. Yeah, look, again, I'm a big fan of drawing pictures. So I have notebooks filled with my scribbles all over them because I have missed that interaction myself. Interestingly, towards the end of last summer, before that second or third wave, I forget which wave we're in now, kicked in, we were really pushing to land the network optimization project, and we really wanted to get people in a room, because sometimes that pressure cooker really works in terms of, you know, we're not leaving until we've solved this problem. We obviously couldn't do that, so we had to solve it using the collaboration tools. It's doable. I think it will get easier over time because we'll get more used to working in this way. I am looking forward to. You know, I'm going to be a flexible worker. I'm not going back to the office full time, purely because it's saving me so much hassle in terms of time. I get much more done now. But I am looking forward to, when we have these particularly knotty problems coming along, getting people in a room. I don't think that's the only way forward, though. I do think it's a mix of the two. So we've had to use collaboration tools. It's been a learning curve. I think a lot of people have struggled. I've got much better at drawing with a mouse than I ever thought I would be able to draw boxes and goodness knows what else on virtual whiteboards. So we've embraced the technology, but I don't think it ever quite replaces that face-to-face. But I think the difference is the collaboration tools will be the go-to point to start with going forward, not the face-to-face. So I think, as you said, Matt, jumping on a train is probably option B, not option A.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, actually. Option A, option B. I think that's all the questions. I think we have covered all the questions now, unless I have missed anything. Shama, is there anything else from your side?
Yeah, I just wanted to dig into, I'm just pulling up the poll results there. One of the poll results there that we've seen is that, Matt, like you said, most organizations sitting in the maturing part of the digital transformation journey. And Chris, I wonder if you have kind of any maybe top tips or advice that you can give to those organizations that are sitting there now in the midst of this kind of flexible working. What will these enterprises need to do in order to get themselves to the advanced stage of the digital transformation journey?
I think my first tip would be keep the customer at the heart of it, because it's easy to get sucked in. You know, digitization it's a great marketing phrase, right? Everyone loves it. Everyone wants to go digital. What does that really mean? And it's about making the customer experience easier. Really, that's what it should be. It shouldn't be about driving a cost outcome. It should be about driving, you know, brand loyalty, you know, customer engagement, customer satisfaction. So for me, I would always stick with keep the customer at the heart of it, and then, as I mentioned earlier, understand that journey that they're taking through the various systems you're using. Understand where you've got weaknesses, and I think the focus is much more. It's interesting. I think infrastructure was a commodity. I think it's that next generation of commoditization with the virtual working, things like the Equinix fabric. We're about to start exploiting that. That's driven another version of infrastructure, but I think the focus has to be on the application estate and making sure that's ready to embrace dynamic change. Because a lot of, certainly again, an insurer with a couple of 100 years of experience, we've got some fairly clunky old applications, and those are our challenge areas. So keep the customer at the heart of it. Focus on making sure your applications are digital ready, not just the front end, but the entire journey. That's where I would focus.
Definitely. It just reminds me of some research we did at the beginning of this year, and we release a digital trends report every year as a community where we survey our community and see what they have to say about their digital strategies. And one thing that, I mean, linking back to what you were saying earlier about the acceleration, one thing we saw really jump this year was the number of organizations saying that digital is in their DNA. So we asked them about where they are with their digital strategy, and is it by department? Do you have a clear strategy communicated across all departments? You know, where are they with that? Are they still developing it? The top end of that is digital is in our DNA, and we saw that double the proportion of respondents saying that this year as opposed to last year. So I think that just reflects what you were saying there. So Chris, Matt, I don't know if you've got any closing remarks before we move on to the next section of this morning.
I think, well, firstly, I would like to personally thank Chris for sharing such valuable insights this morning. I'd like to thank the audience that were very active in putting some questions through. That always helps the conversation. I think, you know, as you know, we work with so many businesses across so many sectors, and one of the questions we always get asked is, well, you know, is everything different? And you hear we've done 2 of these so far, and you know, the stories are very similar. But I think what's come through for me in this one is really that people and technology. So people not only that are working for Aviva, but also the customer as well. It's a very customer centric business. And the technology enables us, but you've really got to make sure it works both for your employees and it's serving your customers. So that was what I sort of picked up really this morning as the thread running through this.
Definitely. Well, Matt, thank you so much for leading this discussion, and Chris, for your insights that you've shared this morning. Thank you. It's been really great to hear what you've been doing at Aviva.